Okay, hello, my friends. It is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, and this is a daily brief. Something just amazing happened, not amazingly good. The US government just stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine. This is pretty terrible. And it's like they were just deciding, you know what, we're just not going to let them. Right? I just put tape over my mouth if you're watching on Spotify. That as a visual, like that's what happened here. We'll talk about that extensively in just a moment. Let's talk about what else is going on very quickly. 1,250 Russians off the battlefield. That's about par for the course over the last month. One tank, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 23 artillery systems, 84 vehicles, and fuel tanks. Okay, this is the British intelligence update. I'm showing you this because the trend lines are really funny to watch. I mean, not funny, haha, but odd to watch. It was going up and up and up, and then it just started dipping. Okay, Russia has likely sustained approximately 90,000 casualties killed and wounded in the Russia-Ukraine conflict so far in 2025. That's since January 1st, 90,000. Since invading Ukraine, Russia has sustained approximately 875,000 casualties in total. I did a video not too long ago when it clicked over the 800,000 line that like, hey, by early summer, we're going to see 1 million casualties if given a consistent rate. The average daily Russian casualties during February 2025 was 1,255, according to Ukrainian General Staff reporting, the lowest daily average since August of 2024. Total reported Russian casualties in February 2025 was 35,140, decrease of around 13,000 from January's total, okay, which was the second highest monthly total. So if we look at this and we look at, let me click over here and look at the chart. So here's the lines. Here, the bottom line is 2022, and then it's a little higher in 2023, higher yet in 2024, and then 2025 actually dipped down, right? So it was really interesting to see how that has changed, and we'll see if those lines intersect at some point or if the casualty rates go up. Last night, there was a Russian attack that damaged at least 20 private houses in the suburbs of Odessa, commercial premises, a business center, a post office, a medical laboratory, shopping facilities. Cars were damaged and destroyed. And here's what the attack was. It was 181 Shahed drones. It's a high number. Again, 65 is a daily replacement rate unless something has changed. And then at least one ballistic missile. We don't know how many Iskander missiles were actually shot down, but 3 were launched. And again, the kinds of things that were damaged. 73-year-old man was killed. Damages 20 private houses. Odessa lost electricity, water, heating after a targeted infrastructure attack that devastated these families. Okay, let's turn our attention to the battlefield because we got to get to the big story. And the big story is all about how we're not sharing our information, our intelligence with Ukraine anymore. Across direction, invaders try to break through Ukrainian defenses 17 times. Very low number. I don't think Russia has the resources to keep pushing the attacks at the rate that they were doing in December and January. And something has slowed materially, and the Ukrainians are strong enough to actually push back and actually take back some land. Ukrainian raids unravel months of Russian gains in Toretsk, according to Euromaidan Press. The Ukrainian advance through the localized raids managed to expand the gray zone and drive Russians out from a large part of Toretsk, according to the report. So, hey, how about that? Okay. Now, let's look at POWs, or not POWs, AWOL figures. Sorry, excuse me. The assessing overall manpower casualty ratios, a group has analyzed Russian AWOL figures alongside Ukrainian estimates, factoring KIA, MIA, and recruitment rates to assess the war's prospects. So, thanks to Inform Napalm, a Ukrainian OSINT community, they analyzed a screenshot of Russian presentation slide to detailing desertion numbers. And it turns out there's high desertions, particularly in the southern military district, highest number of desertion cases. Not surprising because it includes the areas which are largely composed of forcibly mobilized residents from occupied areas. So very high desertion rates. And those numbers are actually something like 22,000 cases of this, 22,577 cases of this. After applying the same method to each district, they arrived at a total of about 50,000 documented AWOL cases of desertion. That's documented, so the numbers are certainly higher than that, but yeah. Okay, now the desertion rate, just for comparison, in the U.S. Army during Vietnam was about 5%, and so that's pretty high figures. And then if we look at it and just a little bit more, what we find out is that the loss ratio is about okay. So here's approximately okay. So when factoring in KIA, that's killed in action, heavily wounded and disabled, you can't come back to the battlefield, and MIA and desertions, the number of permanently lost personnel is estimated at 560,000 for Russia, about 300,000 for Ukraine. This is a ratio of about 1.87 for Russia to every one in Ukraine. Now, because of Russia's size, you need it to be about 1 to 3, but this is about right. This gels with what I understand about how the losses go on the battlefield. Okay, this is interesting. Jay and Kiev put this out. Russia is now only able to take around 2 square kilometers per day, a rate at which it would take about 672 years to occupy the remaining 211 square kilometers at the cost of 294,336,000 soldiers. Of course, Russia only has a population of 143.8 million, which means that you'd have to have double the population in order to occupy all of Ukraine, or to take all of Ukraine. So what you're seeing though on this is that in November, it was very high. In December, it was very high. In January, it started to fall off, and then in February, even more. And as far as how much uh, ground they were able to actually achieve. And again, these are correlated with the number of assaults and the number of high casualties as well. This was the height of casualties right here. Okay. So let's turn our attention to this. This is the big story here. U.S. military aid pause leaves Ukraine cities in an unprotected zone of potential missile strikes. So we know that they paused U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Like that stopped. Yesterday, I reported that there was no pause in intelligence sharing, but that was yesterday. And today we find out, yep, there is a pause. It just started. Trump's pause of military aid will impact protection of Ukrainian cities from Russian missiles, according to the ISW. But now this is he's a CNN anchor and chief national security analyst at CNN. He says a senior U.S. military official tells CNN that the U.S. has curtailed some intelligence sharing with Ukraine, which could affect both offensive and defensive operations, including air defense, since Ukraine also depends on U.S. intelligence for Overwatch. Among these changes is a reduction of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance flights. One senior Ukrainian military official says that the U.S. has lost Ukraine's trust. Okay, yeah, of course they did. Intelligence sharing could be restored, but not trust. I get it. I understand. I'd feel the same way if I was a Ukrainian myself. Okay. U.S. officials held unofficial talks with Zelensky and his team following the Friday exchange in the Oval Office, according to CNN. The goal is to steer negotiations back on track. So part of this playing hardball is, okay, well, we'll withdraw our aid to you, and that'll bring you to the table. Of course, they're not doing the same thing to Putin, but that's because, okay, so some of you will interpret that and say, well, that's because he's just Putin's puppet. Maybe it is. It could also be that if Putin doesn't want to come to the table, they'll do the same thing to Putin by increasing sanctions or giving back aid or whatever. I don't know how that'll play out, but it's been pretty one-sided so far. Trump holds firm on military aid freeze despite Zelensky's overture. That is what he put in the speech yesterday. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Zelensky had this tweet where he was saying to Trump, hey, look, we want to work together. We want peace. Nobody wants peace more than us. And Trump actually read that in the State of the Union yesterday, or parts of it. Donald Trump has not lifted his ban on further arms shipments or major aid to Ukraine, despite Zelensky's conciliatory message on X, where he expressed regret over stalled negotiations and pledged to work toward peace with Russia under U.S. leadership. Now, there was also apparently some secret diplomacy. CNN reports that Trump's team secretly met with Zelensky, urging him to repair ties with the White House. London's pressure, British officials also, including Prime Minister Keir Starmer, have also pushed Zelensky to reconcile with Trump. And Trump's taken kind of a victory lap of, hey, we're moving the right direction. Okay, it's not the kind of victory lap he wanted, but it's still he's taking one. Yeah, in the it wasn't a State of the Union, the joint session before Congress. It said like taking candy from a baby. Trump briefly mentions aid to Ukraine, but offers no real news in this raucous speech. Now, I covered this whole thing. There wasn't a lot about Ukraine in it, but if you want to understand where Trump is going, what he's thinking, how he's going through, I did this as a Q&A. We listened to bits of this, and I answered questions along the way when things weren't relevant to Ukraine. And so you can watch this on YouTube as on the live stream. I would say it's better to listen to it on Spotify. This just lends itself toward that. So if you're on Spotify, Professor Gerdes explains live Q&A during Trump's speech. Okay. Now if you go to Spotify, you just won't get to see Green getting kicked out. Now, I'm not talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm talking about the Democratic Congressman Green, who was told to sit down and wouldn't sit down and was eventually kicked out. The sergeant at arms had to escort him out of that. I've never seen anything like that ever in my lifetime. So yeah, it was something to watch. Okay, former head of MI6 says Putin is expecting Trump to save him. Absent this, Russia will collapse. I think that there's something to that. I think that there's something about like Putin's economy is just going to be in trouble if it is not bailed out prematurely, and that's where my money is. That's where it'll go, short of a deal that causes it to be saved. Okay, Putin is not fighting for land in Ukraine. This is just commentary from Business Ukraine magazine. He views the war as a historic mission to erase Ukraine from the map of Europe. Putin believes extinguishing Ukraine's statehood is the key to reversing Moscow's Cold War defeat and reviving the Russian Empire. I think there's clearly an aggressor here. Sergei Lavrov, to a question on whether Zelensky will come to the negotiating table following the suspension of military aid by Donald Trump, he says, I cannot read the thoughts of that human, talking about Zelensky. On the other hand, you can hardly call him human. Okay, Lavrov is saying that you can hardly call Zelensky human. I'm thinking that there's a lot of Ukrainians that would look at him and think, yeah, hardly human. How can you possibly do this to other people? Okay, it's reported that CIA Director John Radcliffe confirmed the pause of supplies of military equipment and intelligence data to Ukraine. There have also been reports, now this goes beyond what I just said, that the UK is not allowed to supply intelligence data from the US to Ukraine, like whatever the Brits understand from the US, they're not allowed to pass that on. Like you can't share that as well, so it can't go through a back door and get there. Okay, in other news, Belarusian dictator Lukashenko says, quote, I'm waiting for Trump, Zelensky, and Putin in Belarus for negotiations. We need to make a deal. Come if you want. It's just 200 kilometers from Kyiv. Have a half hour by plane. We'll sit down calmly, no noise, no shouting, and agree. He says in an interview. Right. Yeah, let's just call that Minsk III, because that's what it feels like is about to be kind of pushed forward, and this is why Zelensky says, I need real deals. I think they should do it in Minsk, just to show if we make this deal, the Russians are about to violate it. Okay. One of the biggest Ukrainian Telegram channels out after Trump cuts off intelligence sharing with the increasingly popular sentiment that the U.S. has joined Russia. I understand this perspective. Okay, here's a translation. The U.S. continues to blackmail us with the issue of military aid. If we give in to this, the demands will only become more numerous. They will become more absurd. Now the U.S. has effectively become an ally of the Russian Federation. You shouldn't rely on them. Better to throw it on the Russian cutter. Okay, so I get the sentiment. It grieves me that this is how Ukrainians are processing what's been happening here. I think because it's been only so one-sided, where the U.S. just seems to be pressuring Ukraine, not making any demands of Russia. But I think there's a day coming here where, okay, Zelensky comes to the table, Putin come to the table, no, or I need to have all these demands, no. Like I think eventually you'll see the pressure go on Russia, but we just haven't seen that yet, and so this is very, very frustrating in the meantime, and I understand that. Okay. The hunt continues. FPV drone captures the moment a Russian reconnaissance drone is destroyed. Look at this. There it is. Boom. Wow. Like drones attacking drones, I just found so fascinating. It's just, yeah. Okay. On this day in 1940, as part of protecting them from fascism, Stalin signed the order to murder 22,000 Polish officers at Katyn. Our recent crimes, we blame Nazis. Or like our recent crimes, we blame Nazis. This is Stalin writing approved on their death warrant. Imagine crimes against humanity on this scale today. How about that? Well, that's where we are, my friends. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.